Welcome to another episode of the Everyday Game Changers podcast. I am your host, Baron McQueen, and I have a guest today that I'm super excited to speak to. You know, we always talking about people that's changing the game in business and community and music and influence, and today is no different. I have Bonnie Low-Kramen, a workplace expert. Y'all gonna love this. Everybody's not in the entrepreneur space. Some people still working, and it's hard to navigate that workplace. And she's the expert, and she gonna shed some light on some topics that I think people don't talk about. Bonnie, how are you?
I am great, Barry, and it's great to be here with you.
Thank you for coming on the show. So, like, how do you let's start from the beginning. How do you get into this workplace, almost like an advocate for?
Yeah, the truth is that pretty much nothing about my career was planned.
Okay, got it.
When I went to Rutgers a million years ago, I was trying to be an actress. I was an English and theater major. I loved writing, and I loved show business.
Got it.
And I thought, well, let me be a theater major. And I tried being an actress for like 5 minutes. It didn't work.
Okay.
But what I realized is I needed to be behind the scenes. And so my career really began in a theater box office, making very little money, but getting to understand the workings of show business from the back of the stage, And that led to me working with Olympia Dukakis, who we began working with each other a year before she shot the movie Moonstruck, which is the film she won the Academy Award for.
Wow.
And the work in this theater that she was running in Northern New Jersey enabled us, she and I, to work with each other side by side in relative anonymity for that year. Kind of like how you and I would work together if we were like deciding, let's put bodies in these seats and figure out how to do that together. We weren't under a spotlight yet. And then once she came to me and said, yeah, I'm going to Canada to shoot a movie.
Wow.
And I'm going to play Cher's mother. And,
oh my goodness.
This turned out to be, when she told me the studio, so up until that point, she was a really, a working actress but doing smaller movies and television shows. And I remember saying to her, holding my breath when I said, Olympia, tell me what the studio is on this. And she said, MGM.
Oh, wow.
And I just remember I started to scream. I won't do that here for you. But I was, when it's that kind of power behind a movie, then it's going to be a big Hollywood film. And she got nominated for the Oscar, won the Oscar. And all of this was building up to me becoming her personal assistant.
Wow.
That her fame, as is the case with many famous, busy people, they can't make it all happen by themselves. So she needed someone by her side to make it all happen, to do all the things that she couldn't do and didn't need to do. And that was me. I became communication central. So in a million years, I never thought it would last for 25 years, my work with
That's
Olympia.
Amazing.
And that 25 years taught me so much about women in the workplace, the power of mentorship, how business is working, how to negotiate for money. I had a front row seat for fame and fortune and the inner workings of Hollywood and television and Broadway, because she was in all of that. And when we were working together, I went to college and I thought to myself, I wanted, Barry, and the truth is I would work with Olympia. We were winging it every single day. I didn't even know there was the name personal assistant. I didn't even.
Wasn't a thing yet, right?
I went to Barnes and Noble. I went to the bookstore and I said, I'm going to get a book about being an assistant, a better assistant, because I wanted to be as great an assistant as she
He
was an
was, of
actress.
course, of course.
And I went into the bookstore and I found like this many books in a
Wow.
sea of books. And very few of them had anything to do with what I was doing with
Right.
Olympia. So in that moment in Barnes & Noble, I stood there and I said, I think I have to write the darn thing myself.
Mm.
And I did. And so I wrote this.
Wow. Be the ultimate. That's amazing.
Be the ultimate assistant. That's, you know, I thought to myself, Marion, I could spend the rest of my career complaining that there is no book. And then I realized there is no class.
Right.
So I decided this is crazy, because other assistants were starting to come to me to ask for advice and guidance. And the crazy thing was that I had the answers.
Right.
You know,
that's that on-the-job training, right?
Yeah. And I just realized that not only did I have the answers, but I really enjoyed sharing it. And of course, that English major of mine came in handy when it came to time to write a book, because I knew how to do that.
Got it.
So, yeah. So Olympia and I had a long run. It was an amazing experience. But then the day came when I realized I was getting invited to speak all over the country. And I was, because of the book, I was being contacted by just a lot of people. And I realized it was time for me to go. It was time for me to leave my work as an assistant and to go off and teach and speak.
Right.
It all happened, Barry, very organically.
Wow.
It just very naturally. And at this moment, I've been in 14 countries and 38 states.
So
in a million years, I never thought it would take me to Dubai or Germany or Africa.
So let me ask you something. Being that you like the catalyst for that position, how does somebody come to you and want to assist you? You must be the toughest person.
Oh, that's so funny. My assistant Jen gets that a lot. We've been together 9 years.
Okay.
I used to live in New Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl.
Nice. I'm from Delaware.
Yeah, I read that about you. And now I relocated to Florida to get away from the ice and the snow. I still love New Jersey, but
What part of Florida are you in?
Pardon?
What part of Florida?
Oh, yeah, we're both in Florida. I'm in Ponte Vedra, Florida.
Where's that at?
Up near Jacksonville.
Okay.
The land of golf and the PGA and all that.
Got it.
So, yeah, I do enjoy being warm all the time.
Agreed.
But Jen is still in New Jersey. So we work together virtually 1 day a week. And we have, we're in there 9 years already.
Wow.
And it's really a great relationship and partnership. But a lot of people say to her, oh my gosh, that must be daunting working for somebody who's a company called Be the Ultimate Assistant.
Right. I mean, just the pressure, but that just is a testament to how good she must really be to fit the role, right?
I feel like we've learned together, because her area of expertise is social media and marketing. And I know you're a real guru when it comes to that. Yeah. And my brain kind of explodes. You know what it speaks to, Barian, is that Olympia used to say to me, Bonnie, you don't have to be an expert in everything, but you do need to know who the experts are to go to get the answers we need fast. Sense.
Got it.
And I believe we need, we only get 24 hours in a day, and we can't be an expert in everything, right?
Agreed.
So doesn't it make sense to surround ourselves with people who have the expertise and the passion for the things that just make my brain hurt?
And I tell people all the time, let people be in the lane that they specialize in. So it's just
Yes.
I'm not a graphic designer, so I have graphic designers, right? It's like I want to just deal with the people who are passionate about what they do. So I know I'm dealing with somebody that's not over their lane and I'm not in their lane. They're not in my lane, and it works, right?
It totally does. We need to throw money at it sometimes. You have to throw money in the area that you don't like to do. I tell this to executives.
Yeah.
You want to have an assistant who does the things that you're not good at,
Right.
that you don't like to do and that are not worth your time to do. Like
All the
time
time.
is money.
Dollar productive tasks, right? It's what we need to
Yeah.
focus on. I get that. So like talk to me about this dynamic of you seeing problems in the workspace that, especially
Mm,
from a women's perspective, Women's History Month, salute, right?
yeah.
How what do you see in that space that is stuff people don't talk about, or maybe
Yeah.
some women are in that space, especially either in entertainment or just in any work field that they
Yeah.
deal with on a daily?
Well, women had a lot of obstacles pre-pandemic.
Right.
And in these last 2 years, it's gotten even more difficult. I mean, the data is showing that 5 million women have had to leave the workforce because, their need to take care of children or,
Right.
sick family members or whatever. But more and more of them are coming back. Um, in the world I move in, which is mainly executive and personal assistants, that population is 95 to 98% female.
Of
So
course.
essentially, I spend my life in rooms, physical rooms, virtual rooms of women.
Right.
And they talk to me, Barian. They have been talking to me, and I've been working on, this year, my second book will be published called Staff Matters. And it's
Hmm.
very much based on these conversations that I've had with women and lots of men as well. But the problems in the workplace have really had a glaring spotlight on them since the pandemic.
Got it.
I gave a TEDx talk recently, and I called it The Real Reasons People Quit.
Hmm.
And
Love that.
one of the biggest problems that, you were talking earlier about the things that aren't being said.
Right.
There are a lot of things, subjects that aren't being talked about in the workplace. Two of the biggest are workplace bullying and sexual harassment.
Great.
And women are the primary targets of
Right.
those behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
It's they're very difficult subjects to talk about for women.
Of course.
There's, they a lot of, and I am passionate about it because I myself have experienced workplace bullying. I've experienced sexual harassment,
Mm-hmm.
and when you experience those behaviors, it is the opposite of how it's supposed to be in the workplace.
Got
And
it.
you've been a working person for a long
Yeah,
time. In my
definitely.
view, the baseline needs to be that if we were working together, the very basic relationship that we need to have should be based on respect, mutual
Great.
respect,
Mm-hmm.
and professionalism.
Great.
We don't have to be best friends. In the workplace, if friendships happen, that's a bonus.
Great.
What we do
Great.
need to be, though, is respectful and professional. And bullying, workplace bullying, and sexual harassment are completely disrespectful behaviors.
Great.
And they're taking unfair advantage of a power position.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, those behaviors chase good people away.
Great.
When people are bullied or sexually harassed, all they do is want to leave. And, you've read the headlines about the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
Well, I've got news for the leaders. The Great Resignation was in motion long before the pandemic.
Right.
That these negative behaviors were happening then, and they're happening now. In addition to that, we have the wage gap, and money.
Mm.
Money is a hot button for everyone, but especially for women, because the data is clear that, we just had equal pay day,
Right.
which meant that it takes women all the way till March of 2022 to make what a man did in just 2021.
Right. Wow.
And that's for Caucasian women.
Right.
It is the situation it would take till July for
Wow.
African American women. And Latina women, it's worst of all. It would take till August of 2022 to make what men did in 2021. And so a wage gap is very real, and money is not everything, but it certainly can make a big difference in a person's life.
Yeah.
So those issues are in play. And then the fourth thing that I say in my talk that is chasing people away, it's making people quit, is the lack of support for professional development.
Mm,
In this
agreed.
workplace we've got now, it's a very different place than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And that is requiring some upskilling, some workshops and, training. I was struck how at the beginning of the pandemic, so many companies had, for example, brought in Office 365 in January of 2020. And so they paid millions of dollars for software, but then offered very either little to no training,
right,
how to use it.
That's a fact.
I'm sure you use a computer.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen by magic or overnight that you know how to use these programs. I mean, when everybody was sent home suddenly in March 2020, you have to know that there were some leaders out there who were completely caught off guard. They never, knew how to work Zoom, for example.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, agreed.
Their assistant did that for them.
Of course.
And now their assistant wasn't there.
That's a fact.
So now we're all having to figure out how to work remotely. So it's complicated what's going on. And that's why I'm so busy, because leaders are realizing now that there are deficits in the workplace that are being revealed because of what's gone on.
It's interesting because I'm 36. I've only had 2 jobs my whole life.
Wow, very unusual.
I was at one company. I was at a civil engineering firm for about 13 years. And then I left there when I relocated to Florida. And I was at another company for another 6 years. So those are the only 2 jobs I've ever had.
Now, time out a second. That tells me, you and I have just met today, and I just learned that fact. What I conclude from you saying that is that you were treated with respect at both those places. Would that be accurate? Or no?
You know what it is? I actually felt like I didn't get the respect I deserve. I just felt like I had a couple things against me that just kept me there. I was so uncomfortable to leave.
Really?
Yeah. So the first company I worked at, that was the only job I knew because they recruited me straight out of high school.
Wow.
So as I'm navigating this space in the civil engineering field, what I'm learning is, the real money is going to come in once you finish college and get the degree for civil engineering. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I went to the University of Delaware for civil engineering. And, I speak to the owner and I was like, I'm in my junior year. I'm getting close to my senior year. I may not be able to work as much as I'm working now because I have to dedicate this last year to finish. So my time coming here, I won't be able to finish college. And so let me ask you, once I get this degree, how is that going to affect what I'm paid now? And he said, well, Baron, you should probably make about $10,000 more a year. And I'm looking at what my tuition was. And I'm like, I'd never pay this money back to the university at that rate. And then you know what I felt like? I felt like because I was very young, but moved up really fast in companies, that because I was still young, they didn't take me serious in the workplace.
They were taking advantage of you.
Yeah.
They were taking advantage of you because you didn't know. Did you finally figure out how to do the research to find out what you should have been being paid?
So I was making, you know how I found out what I should be paid? When I told him I was moving to Florida.
And how much more should you have? Double.
From $15 an hour. From $15 an hour to $30 an hour.
Wow. Shame on them. Shame on them. And the trend right now, so many lessons in that story, Barry. Wow. And I hear them every day. Yeah. And to have been, would you have still moved to Florida had you been paid what you were worth?
I think for me, like as a kid, I always just knew I was supposed to be in Florida. I used to visit my friend, and he's just like, I was in Delaware, so the beach was maybe 2 hours away, and I just always thought I needed to be near some water all my life.
Got it.
And
And you did it.
I always had this in the back of my mind. When I grow up, I'm gonna live in Florida where I can pick a beach right off I-95. I can pick a different beach each time.
Yeah.
And I think because I was frustrated at work, I was like, this is the perfect opportunity to just get away from here and start fresh.
And that's why people quit. Disrespect.
Yeah.
And it's amazing you stayed for 13 years. Most people don't stay for 13 years if they're feeling disrespected. But the fact that, you don't know what you don't know, and you were young. And I'm really glad for your listeners that you shared that story, because it's very powerful. I think we all can learn something from it.
So when I came to Florida, I'm privy to a little information now, right? So it didn't take me another 13 years. It took me 6, but it didn't take me another 13 years. But it was the rapport that I built with the owner that I thought that I moved up very fast. So when I moved to Florida, there weren't any engineering firms hiring. So I had all of this experience in civil engineering, but nobody was hiring civil engineers at the time. So I ended up in a hurricane impact window business. So I learned this business, knew nothing about windows. And this guy was like, we're going to start you off at $45,000 a year. And then there's opportunity for bonuses and sales and commissions. So I was just like, okay, this is opportunity for advancement.
Okay.
So after about 4 years, I was looking at how much I was selling on the side for him. So I was getting a base salary, but I knew if I wanted to make real money, let me sell too and get a commission. I was doing like $3 million a year in sales for this guy, but the commission structure didn't match what I was selling.
Okay.
And I was just like, so if I sell $3 million, I only made an extra 10 grand for the year. And I'm like, the number don't even make sense at all for $3 million's worth of sales. So as I'm getting up in the company and I've moved to director and operation manager. And so I'm like, at this point, me and the owner are getting a closer relationship of what I thought was like a friendship more than just work, right?
Right.
I'm hanging out at the house, and we're going out for drinks, and I'm like, oh, so now I'm feeling like a friendship, but no lines were really crossed as far as when it's business, we know it's business, and when it's friendship. So it got to a point where I was like, I'm looking at where the company is going. Before I was with the company, there's a lot of things I implemented into the company that didn't exist before.
Mm-hmm.
And these implements that I made the company between like $7 and $10 million that you didn't have before me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, how do we talk about, since I can't go any higher in the company, how about we talk about some kind of incentive or some kind of percentage? Can I get some kind of percentage? And I was just laughed
Reasonable
out.
Question.
Just
to which he answered?
Laughed out the room. We'll talk about that. And we never talked about that for 2 years. For 2 years. Because I had went through this with a company before. So now I feel like I'm being more direct in my delivery. Like, hey, this is what I want. This is the value that I bring.
But you hung in there for 2 years?
2 years waiting for him to say this and this and this. And I was like,
what?
I quit in 2019. I quit.
Oh my God. Leaders lose such good people, and you were still pulling in that kind of income for them.
Yeah. And I don't know if he felt like everybody's after I left the company, he asked me to come back and train.
Was he willing to compensate you fairly for that?
Of course. I turned him down.
And did you tell him why?
Yeah, because I said, had you done me correctly, I would have never even thought about leaving the company.
And what did he say to that?
He says, yeah, but you was talking about like shares or like some kind of ownership. And, I'm the owner.
It's a negotiation. Oh my gosh. Oh my, Barry, and I hear these stories so often. And so my goal is to train young people to negotiate. As I worked for Olympia, there she was an actress, and she had an agent and a manager.
Okay.
And she would receive a script. And if she was interested in it, 100% of the time, her first question, once she realized she wanted to do it, because some of the things she was like, oh no, I don't want to do this. But if she wanted to do it, her very first question always was, can they get me more money? Can they get me more money? And I would sit there and watch this, and I think, oh, I get it. It's very easy for Olympia Dukakis to ask for more money because she's not the one asking. She has a manager and an agent to do the asking. And I would sit there and I would think, who's asking for me?
Right.
And it's so painful. No one trains most young women are not trained how to negotiate. And clearly you are not taught either. The basics that we need to do better. Now, I see it as my obligation to train young women and men about how to do it. And if I wish I'd gotten a hold of you so I could coach you, and your career might have ended up a bit different, much differently. But my hope, like stories like this, people hearing your story can learn from it and know, come to me, BonnieLow-Kramen.com, or let us train young people on how to negotiate. It's a skill. And the shame on those managers you had who took unfair advantage.
Yeah.
And there's too much taking unfair advantage.
Right. Yeah. I put a post up, and this was when I wouldn't say I was a disgruntled employee, but I was always
every right to be.
Yeah. I always knew that I was not going to be there for the long haul after we had that conversation. Right. So when I told him that I was leaving, he said to me, Baron, I knew this day would come. I just didn't know when. So I said, well, what do you mean? He said, you're a very bright guy. I knew one day you was going to venture off and do your own businesses and do your own thing. I just didn't know when. I was like, well,
It didn't have to be this way.
It didn't have to be this way. And that's how I explained it to him.
Yeah.
I said, you're very disconnected from your employees. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I said, you come in maybe once a week, twice a week. The business runs because the people behind your business are great at what they do, right? You don't incentivize them. There's no company morale. Me as a manager of the company, I used to put together like little events just to get to know people outside of work, their spouses. We used to do little bowling trips and baseball games, Miami Heat games. I did that out of my own money because I was building a team for our residential division. I just took ownership of that. I wanted my division to be the best division at the company. Prided myself because that's a reflection of me. So then he's like, oh, Baron, that was a good idea. I'm going to start doing that. And he just took it away from me and he started making, it was like I don't know.
Yeah, that's still another factor in the workplace about leaders or even peers who take credit for other people's work and to not celebrate it. That's very morale reducing. And what you did was instinctively, it's called team building and rapport building. And in the end, it doesn't matter how much technology we have in the workplace, and Lord knows that the workplace is filled with gadgets and, all the technology we have. It still is about the people. It still is run by human beings who have feelings, who get tired, who need to be acknowledged and valued. That if there was one thing I wish leaders would learn in business school, and they don't seem to me to be learning it, is that the thing that staff wants most is to be respected and to
Great.
be valued.
Yeah. It's funny because I tell my staff, I was a great employer, which made me a great boss today, right? So one day out of the week, I don't like the structure of like cubicles and being in the office. I feel like it's depressing. It feels like prison a little bit, right? So I let my staff pick where we're going to work one day a week. It could be the bowling alley, it could be the beach, it could just to change things up. It's just like,
Wow.
so it's a lot of things that I've learned from being an
Yeah.
employee that I was like, you know what, I will never be that type of leader. I will never be that type of boss. I will never I'm so appreciative of the people that work for me because I wouldn't be nowhere near where I am without the people. And so I think it's a little scary to me to be like, man, people are really riding for me, even if it doesn't always directly affect how much money they make. But that was always scary to me. I'm like, man, they really believe. So I feel like I have to go that hard. But I talked to one of my guys and I said, what makes you so happy to come to work? You know what I mean? Because ultimately, do you look at it like you're making me more money, even though it might not reflect in your paycheck? I just asked him. And he said, Baron, the reason I go so hard is because you gave me an opportunity to feed my family. So I'm like, oh man, it just hit me like, oh man, I wasn't thinking like that. And he's like, yeah, some people wouldn't have took a chance on me, maybe because of the way I look, maybe because of my past, or, I don't look like the typical person in this space, and you never judged me. I'm like, man, people judged me all my life. I was Black, I was too young, I had tattoos, everything, you know what I mean? So I get it.
It's you're doing a lot right. How big is your team?
So we're at like 12 now. And when I can't believe it sometimes. And I'm just like, thank God, because when the pandemic hit, we lost a lot of clients for our marketing agency because we dealt with the small business owners, and the marketing budgets was like the first ones cut. So
the pandemic hit.
So it was just like, I told my staff, I said, look, I'm going to do my best to keep everybody working. It might not be the same amount of hours, but if you want to go do your own thing, I completely get it. And then we kind of just slowly started ramping back up, and I started reaching out and like, hey, things are starting to look better. Y'all want to come back? And they're like, oh, we've been waiting for this. We're so glad to come back. So it makes me feel like we're doing something right.
Yeah, leadership does not come easy for people. And it was a shock for me early on, more than 10 years ago. I was at a conference, and the speaker on the stage, I was at the back of the room, and the speaker on the stage asked this big room of assistants, over 200 people. She asked, how many of you feel well managed by your leader, by your executive? And from the back of the room, I saw maybe 20 hands raised, and most of them were like,
scared a little bit. Yeah.
There weren't that many hands that were like, yep, I feel well managed. There was very little enthusiasm for this. And I was wondering, what in the world is going on, Darian? And I went back to America. It was in London, this conference. And that's when I found it. And in the TEDx talk, I talk about it, where I found this poll done by a leadership expert out in Utah who I've been in regular touch with. They figured out that the article in Harvard Business Review is called "We Wait Too Long to Train Our Leaders." And they figured out the average age that a leader gets their very first training in managing people. Men and women go to business school and they learn accounting and macroeconomics and finances, but are they learning how to manage people? You want to take a guess? I mean, what do you think is the average age that a leader gets their first training in managing people?
Let's say 33.
In 2010, when when I read this article,
Hmm?
it was 42.
Wow.
And the poll was updated in 2020.
Oh my
The
goodness.
average age went up to 46.
Wow.
And when I read 42 back in 2010 or 2011, whenever it was like my head
Wow.
exploded. It was like, that's it. That's the reason.
Got it.
That's the connection, the missing piece. If there are so many poor leaders, I hear, your leader who was so out of touch and only came in once a week. I think, I never met the man. He probably never learned the basics for
I agree
how
with that
to manage
100%.
human beings.
I agree 100%. Wow.
They just don't know how. They don't know how. And my students bear that out. And I went to hear Jack Zenger, who did this poll. I went to hear him speak in New York City. Shortly after that article came out, he happened to be doing a speech in New York. And I had a chance to talk to him for 10 minutes. And I told him what I do. And I told him how assistants experience their leaders as not knowing how to lead, as not being effective leaders.
Wow.
And I said, what should I tell them? And Jack said, I'll tell you exactly what you tell them. Tell them they need to manage their managers. That staff, so if anybody hearing me right now, if you're dealing with a leader who does not have excellent leadership skills, it's important to manage them, which means to help show them the way, like you did with the event you did, right?
Yeah.
Where you did the bowling and you brought the families in. You were teaching him. You were teaching him how to be a better leader. And then he took your idea, which wasn't right. He should have, celebrated you and said, Arian initiated this great idea, and now we're going to do it. We're going to put even more money in it, and should have made you his co-lead or whatever. And that would have been elevating for everyone to see a leader who is acknowledging one of them, one of their fellow staff members.
Yeah.
It's on the surface, it doesn't seem that hard.
Right.
But yet in the world, clearly it is hard because there's this great resignation and there's a lot of poor leadership out there. I'm sorry to say.
That's crazy. So when you're dealing with, let's talk about like kind of what women go through in the workplace. What do you think the fear of that speaking out aspect is? Just like, oh, I might lose my job, or what are your thoughts on that? Like, so they just stay quiet.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of suffering and silence going on out there. And pre-pandemic, the fear, there was so much fear that sometimes people would choose not to take a vacation out of fear that if they took a vacation and they were away, then the leaders somehow would see that they weren't needed. And when they would come back from vacation, they would lose their job. And sometimes these fears are imaginate, out of the imagination, and other times they're very well founded, and like these stories do happen. But since the pandemic seems to have really shaken things up and kind of thrown the workplace into the air like a deck of cards, and it's still settling down. Fear still exists, but less so, because there are actually, the truth is that they're calling 2022 the year of the employee, because the employees in many sectors have the leverage. That HR and leaders are working to retain people, to retain their high performers. They're referred to as high value employees, and they don't want to lose them because the run for the exit is happening too often. And I mean, you've probably seen it in your own town. Sometimes, certain businesses have to shorten their hours, restaurants that are not open as long, and because they can't get staff, right? You've seen
my
this.
wife is a Starbucks drinker, and our Starbucks literally for about 3 weeks, almost to a month, closed every day at 1 p.m.
Oh, there you go. That's a perfect example. And in the corporate world, the people who have left, that is putting extra pressure on the people who remain.
Agreed.
Because they can't hire fast enough.
Right. Oh,
and I think it's safe to say HR is in chaos.
Yeah.
Human resources departments are in chaos since the pandemic. They don't know what priority to work on first.
So let me ask you about, like, so I see a big shift in the I don't want to call it like the women's movement, but I'm seeing more women empowerment, more conferences around women, helping women. And, you know, I'm seeing a big rise in that. Is that a direct result of kind of some of this stuff that's happening in the workplace? I mean, I've never seen as many female entrepreneurs and leaders and executives in different industries.
I'm optimistic about what I see. There are still far too few female CEOs, far too few women on boards of companies. The saying these days is it's not so much a glass ceiling as it is a broken rung on the ladder. It's about the pipeline to get to the C-suite. And where's that pipeline coming? And that means leaders need to pay attention to your middle manager women. And how are those programs going? You know, certain things happened in the last few years that I'm very encouraged by, but let's just say women have a long way to go. The wage gap is still, you know, the data shows it's going to take, if we keep going the way we are right now, it's going to take 200 years to get to equity. And that's not good. But I'm encouraged by people like Mark Benioff, who he recently stepped down as the CEO of Salesforce. You know that company, right? Mark Benioff. And Mark was on 60 Minutes, the CBS show 60 Minutes back in 2018. And it was the first time I heard a CEO come right out and say, we at Salesforce are putting money into evening the playing field between women and men. Wow. That we become aware of the wage gap that at Salesforce, we are paying men more than we're paying women for the same job. And so we are going to put real money into evening the playing field. And of course, that speaks to what these women were hired in at. Women are not great at negotiating. Men are better at negotiating. Only 7% of women will negotiate a salary versus compared to 57% of men. Wow. You know, it's simply
big difference.
You know, unfortunately, you were not given that training, but most men they'll negotiate more often than women do. Right. So that was a big deal, and other CEOs followed suit. In what Mark started, and that started this trend towards pay equity and pay transparency. Right. In so many companies, Barry, and I mean, I know you only had 2 jobs before this, but perhaps you've heard that, you know, the subject of money for many people and in many companies feels like this forbidden subject.
Oh, you can't talk about what you make at work.
Oh, no, you're not supposed to talk about it. It feels secret and taboo, and like nobody knows what and there's all this jargon, salary caps and salary bands and leveling, and there's all this language around it. And who's explaining that to anybody? Right. No one is. And so with my students and the workshops I do, I am urging my students to go to HR and respectfully request a pay evaluation, which they are entitled to, which essentially is asking, help me understand what my career path is in the company. What's my future? Right. You know, in terms of finances, and what's the career path here? HR and leaders are taking this much more seriously now, Barian, because of the Great Resignation,
Got
because of the pandemic, because they're trying to hold on to people. And one of the ways to do that is with money. But as you and I seem to agree, money is not everything. It's a lot, but it has to do with being treated respectfully. If you had been treated respectfully and valued, you said you wouldn't have left.
That's the truth. That's the truth.
Yeah. And that's not only the truth for you, it's the truth
for many,
for everyone, no matter how old you are, no matter what color you are. That's how it works.
Man, how long we've been? Oh my goodness, this was good. Let me ask you. So usually, like, before I go, I'm like, what's one piece of advice you can leave with our listeners that'll just help them? They maybe they in a position right now and they want to ask for a raise, but they might be scared, or they know they overworked and the money don't reflect the amount of time they're spending. And what's one piece of advice you can give for that person to just kind of go in there and ask for what you want?
Well, if a piece of the answer is found in your example, so may I use you?
Yes, please.
So you were helping to bring in $4 to $7 million in revenue, right? Every staffer, every employee has been hired for a reason. Somebody at some point looked at your resume and everybody else's resume and said, we want you. We're hiring you for this reason. So therefore, every staffer is holding some responsibility and doing a job. It is about, in my view, my advice would be, in writing, calmly put in writing your literal job description. What is it that you are doing? Quantifiable responsibilities that you helped bring in $4 to $7 million in revenue.
Right.
That you organize team building events 4 per year. You managed a team of 3, or you get where I'm saying. Quantifiable points to put on this business case. What I find is that most staffers have difficulty saying out loud the increase in salary that they want, and it's much easier to put it in writing first. So step 1 is to put in writing your literal job description as detailed as you can, so in black and white, there's no emotion about this. There's no feelings or opinions. It's a fact. You helped bring in $4 to $7 million in revenue.
Right.
Quantifiable facts coupled with research. These days, it's easy to do research on Indeed.com, Glassdoor.com, Salary.com. You can go to a local recruiter and they'll tell you what any particular role is worth in your market, given your experience, given your education, given your skills.
Right.
And that could, let me tell you, job description equals money.
Right.
It's as simple as that. And when an employee goes to a leader and says, I want to talk about my compensation, and to remind you, this is what I actually do.
Right. Because
the job description is something you've created based on fact, coupled with your research, and based on all of this seems to be the salary I should be making. Wow. And all of this can be in writing first, that I recommend giving to your leader, HR, executive, whoever, at least a week ahead of a meeting to talk about this.
Right.
Because essentially the document, the document does the talking for you before you ever have to say out loud,
got it.
My role really deserves to be making $20,000 more than I'm making right now.
Right. And
how do I get there? So the fear usually gets dissipated once it's in black and white.
Right.
Once an employee can look at that document you've created, and I'll say to my students, they'll do that exercise, and I'll look at them and say, is every word on that paper true? Is everything true? Did you bring in $4 to $7 million? You're like, did you do that?
Yeah.
And you say, heck yeah, I did that, right? Then there's nothing to be fearful about, because that's the fact, Jack.
That's
and
it.
Honestly, my students, 8 out of 10 of my students get exactly what they ask for.
Wow.
When they put it in writing and when they do the research. And then if they're still told no, then it's really about listening to the reason why. And that reason will tell a person everything they need to know about whether they're going to stay or go.
Right.
How soon.
That makes sense.
Bonnie. And leaders, let me just say one thing to leaders. Leaders need to listen to their staff. Leaders need to actually talk to the people who they've hired in the first place. That's why the book is called Staff Matters.
I'm looking forward to that. Please let me know when that drops. Because
thank you, Garion. Thank you.
Important, Bonnie. Thank you for your time and your expertise and sharing. And this was amazing. I was excited to just.
This was fun.
For my own personal reasons, right? I went through a lot of these things.
You did. You
advocating for. So it was good.
And now I hope every chance you get, you'll help young people know better how to negotiate.
I appreciate
to learn that. from what you lived through.
Definitely. And that's what this is about, man, giving the information and sharing these stories. But Bonnie, again, I thank you. We definitely will be in touch. And I have to get you back when the other book drops.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck to you.